Okay, we're getting some interesting numbers. It looks like we've got about 26% of you have no experience with publication. About 26% of you have published one or two articles, and almost half of you have done more than three. So what a great spread here. We've got a good range of experience levels. Elizabeth, we're right at 9 a.m. I'm going to get started with your bio, and then I'll close this poll just as we're going through the first slides. For those of you that are attending, you'll see a couple of other questions pop up. And Elizabeth, I'll try and just run those quickly before you get into the meat, if that's okay. So I'll let people answer this initial question while I'm reading your bio. Dr. Elizabeth Creamer is a professor emerita at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, where she was both a faculty member and administrator for 38 years. She has served on the executive board of the Mixed Methods International Research Association for 5 years, including her 2018-2019 term as president. Dr. Creamer has a long publication record that includes 140 journal articles and 4 co-authored or co-authored books and monographs. She's the author of the 2018 textbook by Sage, An Introduction to Fully Integrated Mixed Methods Research, and is now working on a new textbook, Advanced Grounded Theory with Mixed Methods. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Elizabeth Creamer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're going to do another poll before we jump in?
Yeah, so I'm going to end this poll right now, and I'm just allowing a bunch of people into the room as we're getting started. I'll end this one, and I'm just going to run another poll here. So if you guys want to go ahead and answer these polls, very good. We're almost there. So it looks like about half of you are postdoc, about half of small amount of you with master's education. Most of you are either candidates or postdocs, so good to see. I'm going to go ahead and end that one. Just 2 more of these. We're very interested to know where you're all coming in from. I see all of the different areas across the states, across the world.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for participating in these polls. It's very good data for us as we go forward. And we do have some last minute attendees that are still arriving to the room. Interesting, we've got a high prevalence of people from the US today. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this one as well. And just one last question for you all. If you've attended Mixed Methods webinars before.
Ah, look at that.
Wonderful to see that we've got some first timers. Lovely, welcome. Hopefully we'll see you again.
Look at that.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Good to see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this, and then Elizabeth, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. It is really exciting to see the diversity of countries represented from India to Trinidad. I see UK, I see Ireland. I don't want to miss anybody, but I mean, this is just one of the things we're very proud of at MIRA is the breadth of our international representation. So let me just say a little bit about this slide and my teaser in describing this workshop. I said that I wanted to challenge the idea that it's difficult to publish mixed methods research. Well, it's a little bit tricky. I am being a little tricky in that statement. I don't want to suggest it's easy to publish anywhere, but I do want to sort of counter the notion, and this is really the major takeaway. There's a sense that the only place to publish in mixed methods is the Journal of Mixed Methods, and as great a journal as that is, the vast majority of mixed method research appears in other kinds of journals. So that there you have the punchline in general. I see some people I know from Japan coming in too. So here are some of the range of topics that I'm going to cover. I really am hoping that you will find some practical tips here. Some of it is geared to entry level people that haven't published much before, and that and we saw there's about a third of our audience. Some of it is more, a little more advanced. I wish we could have a dialogue because I'm sure that many of you have experiences that you could share with publishing. So, look, we even have someone from Nepal. Just a kind of a little bit about me in addition to what Juliana said. If I had to identify myself, if I had to pick some labels for myself, I would say my first premier identity is as a writer. Close behind that is as a reader, and then I would put teacher in there, and then maybe researcher. So that sort of would be um, my order. The reason that's important is I'm really fascinated with writing. I'm fascinated with the writing process. I'm fascinated with writers in general. I didn't become a textbook author until way kind of late in my career. I don't recommend that. So we even have a slide about writing text. My institution discouraged textbook writing. They said if I was going to write a 9 chapter book, they'd rather have 9 articles. So it wasn't until I was late in my career that I decided to ignore that advice and go ahead and write a textbook. I'd been teaching mixed methods at that point for about 15 years. So I've recently become a journal editor, and that's another role I'll tell you a little bit about more lately. So let's jump right into this idea about journals that are receptive to mixed methods. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but I want to highlight that there are really three bunches or three groups. One you're familiar with probably, the journals that specialize in MMR, Journals of Mixed Methods, the International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches. Those are usually our go-tos. There are many methodological journals who declare their interest is in methodology, and they often publish more mixed methods research than the specialized journals that are dedicated to mixed methods. So I've listed a few of those that I am most familiar with, but here's some examples: the International Journal of Social Research Methodology, the International Journal of Research and Methods in Education, Quality and Quantity. These are only examples. Surprisingly, I would add, and I think this may surprise some people, that a lot of mixed methods is published in qualitative journals. And of course,
Elizabeth,
that, yes.
Elizabeth, I'm going to interject just quickly. We're getting reports that your microphone levels are coming across quite quietly. Can I just get you to undo your microphone? If I can get you to adjust your microphone volume and just bump it up a little bit.
All right, thanks for that tip. I just bumped it up to the max. I hope that helps. Thanks for telling me that. Yes,
No
I hear it.
problem.
Okay.
Thank you, and sorry to
So
interject.
no worries. So I will speak more loudly. Keep telling me if it's a problem. So I was talking about qualitative journals, and I mentioned just one, the International Journal of Qualitative Methods. That's just one. There are many qualitative journals that publish mixed methods. What that means is you really have to have a respectable qualitative component a robust qualitative component if you're going to go toward a methodological, if you're going to go toward a qualitative journal. Here's an official poll that came out of an article that I've identified that looked at high impact journals. And the reason I list this is just to show that the fields where mixed methods are used, which tends to be applied fields, the top two fields are education and nursing. And those are the journals that you see in this list. But they also give you an idea of other venues where mixed methods research is published. Now, for those of you relatively new to publishing, I want to cue you into an aspect of audience related to publishing. So one thing about publishing and picking a journal is it really requires you to be sensitive to audience in a way that you may not be, as say, for instance, you're writing up your dissertation and thinking of those committee members. So the place to go first as you cast your net for journals is the aim statement. And every journal has an aim statement. Ones that are particularly friendly to mixed methods, and this is the journal I am working with, will actually say that they welcome mixed methods. And here you see the language. This is very inviting. Welcomes articles which take quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods approach to research. So there you have a high level of welcoming. It's more common for journals to say they welcome diverse approaches. So that's another set of keywords you might look to that says we welcome diverse approaches. Journals that tend not to be open to mixed methods, in my experience, would be more narrowly focused in either exclusively quantitative or exclusively qualitative. And what that means when the aim statement says that is that means that that's probably the attitude of your reviewers. So if you go to a journal that says we welcome mixed methods, then I think you could expect informed reviewers, as well as reviewers who aren't going to give you a hard time because you use mixed methods. But if you go to a quantitative journal that says they're prioritizing quantitative research and only experimental research, you could anticipate a fairly serious pushback from that kind of journal if you survive what they call the desk review. Now, we've talked about the journals briefly that are specialized in mixed methods, and I wanted to bring up this journal that Tony Amaguzzi and John Hitchcock have brought back to life recently, and that's the International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches. You're seeing, if you have time later on to read this language, they're welcoming of diverse approaches. That language is what you want to see, welcoming diverse approaches. And typical for a methodological journal, they're looking for things that are innovative. In a little bit, I'll talk about what I mean by that. Here's an example of a journal associated with the same operation that runs the webinar. The International Journal of Qualitative Methods. Look at this language here that clues in receptivity. Eclectic, international, innovative advances in methods and designs using qualitative or mixed methods research. So here is welcoming flags, if you have flags, saying, yeah, this is a good place for innovative mixed methods research. And since it's a qualitative journal, that has a good, strong qualitative. Now, there is, as you can imagine, if you published, a big difference between where the journals where you publish your research, the empirical article, and methodological journals or journals with a methodological emphasis. And let me just talk about that a little bit. So if you want to report the study you did and it's a mixed method study, then do not go, for instance, to the Journal of Mixed Methods because you probably won't even survive what they call desk review. In other words, the editor will look at it before it's even sent out to reviewers and will say, no, we don't publish strictly empirical articles. So there could be surprise number one for you that methodological journals expect more reflexivity, more transparency about your methods, and that you're really writing um, to describe how you did your methods. You're writing to an audience of people who might use your method, who might say, oh, I could pick that up, I could do that. So your audience is not that disciplinary, content oriented audience that you're used to, who know your expertise, who know your specialty area. It's people like me, who's a methodologist, reading. Um, I might be reading in urban affairs one day and in business the next. I don't know much about business. I don't know much about urban affairs, but I'm super interested in mixed methods. So I'll go out and read mixed methods article as a methodologist from many, many different disciplines. So the tact is very, very different. When you see a journal that declares a methodological interest, it's very, very different than one that publishes straight empirical knowledge. Clearly, the methodological journals require more knowledge of mixed methods than does an empirical article. The Journal of Mixed Methods, for example, if you picked up like for instance, I recently submitted an article to them about drawing procedural diagrams. And they expect when you publish about some aspect of the method in a specialized journal that you know a lot about it, the method, when you go to those specialized journals. If you go to International Journal of Qualitative Inquiry, they would not be expecting that level of expertise in mixed methods. So difference is how much expertise in mixed methods are they expecting? Here are some aim statements of methodological journals. And this one, for instance, in organizational research, makes clear that part of your audience is a wide range of researchers, not just in your content area. And here you see the emphasis on new methodologies or their application. This is the Journal of Mixed Methods, a highly reputable journal. There you see their explicit declaration. They focus on empirical methodological articles or theoretical methodological articles, meaning a theoretical methodological article may not have data in it other than it has may be using articles as examples. So one of the challenges when you publish in a methodological journal, and when I do workshops, I sometimes see people with wide eyes and having a hard time imagining, how could I be original? How could I be original? I'm a doctoral student. I just graduated. I haven't even taken a course in mixed methods. How is it possible for me to be so audacious to claim that my work is original? Let me give you a few very practical tips that originality is more subtle than you might think. Not many of us write in a way that shifts paradigms or introduces a new methodology. A few people have been out there like that, but most of us are living in more everyday fields. Here are a couple of ways you can be original. I talk about enduring design, for example. a way to be original is to frame the research from the get-go as testing competing theoretical frameworks. This is a very attractive to the reader. It's like both can't be right. I'm exploring two competing ideas. Another way to do this is to shape your article as exploring contradictory findings. My qual said this, my quant said that. I did more analysis and I'm trying to figure out what that means. That is an intuitively appealing article as well. Um, some research that is original reconceptualizes a construct. A construct might be something, let's say identity is a construct, personality is a construct, um, sustainability is a construct. Reconceptualizing a construct that has been used for a long time in the literature, but it's measured in a very unidimensional way. You see that with agency, you see that with attribution, you see that with many constructs that by the time they measure them with a reliable instrument, they're being measured in a very unidimensional way, and often the qualitative research will reveal that a construct is considerably more complex than one had originally imagined. That's original. That's original because it's making a contribution to research. Suggesting different ways of measuring, non traditional ways of measuring a construct that recognize the multidimensionality is a way that you could introduce originality into your analysis. Um, Demonstrating the weakness of a methodology, taking a standard methodology. I did one recently criticizing the use of systematic reviews to evaluate quality of articles because systematic reviews are based on one article. And so the article I wrote is saying you can't really judge quality of a mixed method study on one article if it's a part of a body of work about a project. Um, Qualitative traditions like case study have many critics. So the idea of saying I wasn't able to achieve what I was expecting to achieve, and that may be a methodological problem, could be original. And then the last one is an easy, well, no, it's not easy to do, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about originality in reporting. So I'm hitting on this hard because methodology journals expect originality, and that's why I'm spending time on that. So here's an example. I happen to know that the Journal of Mixed Methods and perhaps other journals as well are particularly interested in attractive, eye-catching visuals. And I think that eye-catching visuals, tables, and figures are like if you would almost imagine, I know articles aren't books and I know that they're read online now, but if an editor is flipping through an article, scanning through, paging through an article, just to give it a quick once over to see, am I going to send this out to editors? A visual can grab the reader's eye. And I'll tell you that sometimes when visuals, tables, and figures are linked, you can sometimes get the whole message of an article through the visuals. Well, this is a visual by Carol Bustamante that was in a recent Journal of Mixed Methods article. It's a very popular visualization. I personally think it has way too much data in it, but I happen to know that this visual is like, wow, this person has made a name based on this single visual in the mixed methods world because it's really showing the multidimensionality of our constructs. I said that sometimes originality is subtle, and this one, it's a subtle variation of something that people use. So Mixed method people are very much in love with joint displays. And joint displays, as you'll see in this one, again, I think this is from the Journal of Mixed Methods. They created a word they call this pillar integration. And a joint display like this is very, very popular in mixed methods, and it includes qual data and quant data. Okay, so there's nothing unusual in a joint display to have qual and quant data, but they put down the middle essentially an integration column. So when they looked at their qual together with their quant, they generated a set of themes and they inserted those themes in the middle. Now, sometimes the themes are put over here on the right, but because they tweaked the standard format of this visual by inserting a column, that's original, that's new. They called it with a new name. So that's what I mean. And sometimes the originality doesn't mean you've shattered the universe in what you've done, that it's so new. Now, a lot of people who publish mixed methods are aware of the need to be transparent about mixed methods. One way to think about that is, again, think about your audience. Think about your audience. This is also, transparency has an advantage, not only to communicate to an audience of mixed methods people, but to reach an audience of mixed methods people. So another way to think about transparency is to think about when you do these kinds of things, and I'll read these to you, then you're creating language, you're embedding language, particularly in the abstract and the title, that are going to get you readers who are interested not as much in your topic as in your methods. So this is particularly true in using mixed methods as a keyword, embedding the word mixed method in your abstract more than one time, not just qual and quant, but mixed methods. And certainly many of the long-standing people like John Creswell have advocating putting the word mixed methods in the title. Again, you're sensitive to your reader. You're saying, if you're interested in mixed methods, this may be an article that could interest you. I think you can also think about using headings strategically. And one of the most important headings is devoted to integration, particularly in the specialized mixed methods journal that you have, for instance, in your findings section, a heading that says strategies used to integrate qualitative and quantitative methods, and or you use the word integration in a table. So these are like signposts for your readers. They're like, oh yeah, this person knows that in mixed methods, integration is expected. The other thing is in the discussion section to be very explicit about what was gained by using mixed methods. So you might have a statement from the qual, these were the major conclusions. From the quant, this was the major conclusions. And then when they were brought together, this new insight was generated, or I was able to improve my sample size. You can't assume that your reader is going to do that intellectual work. So you want to use language that makes it very easy for your reader to see those benefits. So we could talk a long time about the review process, and I'll see how I am on time, so I won't go too long. Every journal would be different. I've jotted down a few things about the review process. Many of you who have published before probably share the experience that if you get 3 reviews, you may have one that's positive, one that's neutral, and one that's negative. Sometimes a journal editor will reject it, and sometimes they won't. So it's really the power of those reviewers. It's very, very rare not to go through rounds of revision, and that those rounds of revision sometimes can be more than one. It could be two, could be three, and that makes the review process can be very long. It can last. Sometimes they come in 6 months, sometimes they come in 3 months, and sometimes it'll take you a year, 2 years to get published. The higher the impact of the journal, the more submissions they get, and the longer the review process will take. So that's sometimes a factor as people are trying to figure out, well, I'm an assistant professor, or I want to get promoted. You need to keep in mind the timelines. Uh, a couple more tips is certainly this part over here. If you're lucky and you've done a good job and you've got some friendly reviewers, you may get language that suggests you may resubmit. Again, sometimes that language is subtle. When you resubmit, I did one recently. I resubmitted. I think I had 19 items in the letter that I constructed describing the revisions that I made. So I took every comment from the editor. Editor 1, line 3, this is what I did. Editor 2, suggestion 5, this is what I did. So they expect that detailed response. I also would suggest to you that this cover letter to the editor is important. I myself neglected that. But when you write the editor a couple of sentences and summarize the purpose of your article, again, it may have a better chance of getting through that preliminary review. It may have a better chance of getting to a reviewer who is interested or sympathetic to your own work. Many times, I will say before moving to the next slide, in the review process, you initially get those reviews back and they hurt your feelings, and it's like, oh, you feel terrible about them because they're rarely glowing. And I say that after a long career. And you're first a little put off with them, and then you put them aside. And the longer you think about the reviews, often there are really important nuggets that help you improve your work. So it is a negotiation between you and reviewers. When a reviewer submits a review, we are asked, would you review this article again? And like I usually say yes, unless I'm overwhelmingly negative about an article. I want to suggest too that you probably have not, I'm going to guess, thought much about the benefits of open access journals. The journal I'm working with, Methods in Psychology, is open access. Now, open access has a fee, and that fee can be quite hefty, and that's scary to people, although there are usually ways to pay that fee. But there are tremendous advantages to open access, including the ease of people finding your article. Secondly, something that I recently realized, people can use, of course, with proper attribution, figures and tables from other people's work. So they might reproduce a table of yours with attribution, but they do not have to go to the publisher and get permission to use those tables and figures, meaning that your tables and figures might have legs, so to speak. Other people may find them so useful and meaningful that they want to do them. They want to use them. Another huge advantage is the breadth of audience in open access, the ability to get to the article. It's very frustrating now, and I think this is increasingly the case. You type in the name of an article, your library doesn't have it, you type it in, and then there's some kind of paywall, and then they want $35 to get a copy of the article. That's not the case with open access. Um, People can get to your article faster. At my university, this is the language we use, and if you work at a university, I suspect they use similar language. I have no idea what subvention means. Maybe some of you do. But in my university, they essentially have a fund to cover open access fees. I mentioned those can be high, but they often have funds to cover that. Occasionally, journals do as well. So we've got maybe 10 more minutes here, and I'll kind of comment just a little bit on when you're writing for a methodological journal. So if you go to the Journal of Mixed, if you're accepted to the Journal of Mixed Methods or the International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches, um, you can anticipate an audience there that is quite familiar with the mixed method literature and with the terminology that we have been coached to use, the exploratory, confirmatory, sequential, concurrent, all that language which we value so much in the mixed methods community because it's our shorthand. Um, it's our shorthand for talking to each other. Um, I'll answer the preprint question here in just a second. That language that we in the mixed method community are familiar with, when you go to a conference, you're saturated with it. It's our shorthand of talking to each other. But the more a field you try to publish, like for instance, if you go into a nursing journal, they're not familiar with that language, and they actually, I've had the experience where they find it alienating. They find it, they're hostile. It's because we use that language. We assume everyone else knows that language, but many people are not familiar with it. So I'm suggesting that you be careful about your language that you use as you publish in non-specialized journals, and at minimum, you define your terms. Do not assume your reader knows what an explanatory design is. Do not assume they know. They're not necessarily insiders. I got a quick question about preprints. I myself often publish preprints on academia or ResearchGate. Some journals, like I believe the International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches, sell articles, and they have strong language that says don't do that for articles you submit to this journal. So in answer to the preprint question, I just suggest that you be sure you read those aim statements and guidelines for authors. The International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches thinks that's a copyright violation. I often do it. I often upload an early draft that's not usually the identical draft, and I always label it as a draft. And again, you can get an audience for an article long, long before it is published or appears online. So I actually think academia and ResearchGate are very, very useful for that. Some people talk about special issues. I'll say just a few words about special issues and be sure we leave good time for questions. So there are lots of good ones in there. Many journals encourage special issues. This is the journal I'm working with. And this is an invitation to any of you who are working in these domains that I particularly am welcoming. because I'm going to be doing a special issue on developing theory with mixed methods, developing and testing theory. So essentially a special issue is like an edited volume. It's similar in that you write a 3 or 4 page prospectus proposing it. You take on the role of either inviting or soliciting submissions. If you're the editor of a special issue, you take on the role of getting a group of people to help you and give you feedback. And then they all appear under the same, in the same volume. Many journals do that. Many journals have sections about special issues. Um, Here's examples of just a few. The International Journal of Social Research Methodology encourages it. Educational Research, Journal of Mixed Methods. Those are usually on a special topic. Like for instance, I'm really interested in using visualization, visual displays to advance analysis. Creative uses of visual displays, for instance, would make a great special issue. As I said, a specialized topic is of particular interest. Um, Different views about paradigms. So I think many people are pretty tired of talking about paradigms and mixed methods. It seems to continue as a topic. Different perspectives on paradigms would make a fantastic special issue. It's a lot of work. It's like writing, it's the same as doing an edited volume. It just means that your articles might appear in a journal with a impact factor, which is important. I was going to say something about book writing, but I'll save that for another day. Um, I love book writing myself. Um, if you've taught for a while or as you teach for a while, and for instance, let's say you're working with nursing, or let's say you're working in a field where you're using action research, or you're working with communities. These are specialized topics that would make great edited volumes. So let me hit some highlights here in terms of takeaway lessons, and then we have time for questions. So first I want to say journals vary from being hostile to mixed methods to being receptive to mixed methods to welcoming mixed methods. Um, and unless you're a person that likes to bang your head against a wall, if they're, don't say they are receptive to diverse approaches, at minimum, I would not suspect they're welcome. I don't have a huge bunch of luck getting editors to respond to queries. A few do. That query being, would you be interested in this kind of article? I personally have not had much luck doing that. There's no harm in trying it. I've talked about how that aim statement of a journal is something to be read carefully, that it's like code. And in that code, you're going to see the priorities that will be reflected in the reviewers. Methodologically oriented journals are interested in innovative approaches to mixed methods. I didn't even talk about how you could be, there's a world that you could talk about innovation, mixed methods with grounded theory, mixed methods with case study, mixed methods with discourse analysis. Crossing methods is another really hot area. Originality is often communicated through an eye-catching graphic. Sometimes that would require you to not just use the templates in PowerPoint, but to expand to wider templates that are really not very expensive. I talked about being transparent. I suggested that using all the language that we are so accustomed to is not necessarily welcomed in all journals. And I touched briefly on how if you teach a long time in mixed methods, or a long time being a couple of years, you may think of yourself as being quite an expert that might be ready to move on to a book. So let me stop there, and we got plenty of time for questions. So I'll bring Juliana here, who's our wonderful moderator, and see where we can go with some questions.
Absolutely, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. So, going back in our chat window, I'm going to start off with a question from Madavi. If the article is about guiding MMRs, then will this come under methodological or empirical ones?
I would say methodological. Now, one of the tricks this is the school of hard knocks here. One of the tricks is you go to a specialized journal like the Journal of Mixed Methods. It's methodological, but its audience is people who know a ton about mixed methods. Students read the journal, but articles and reviewers are written as if you're expected to be an expert in mixed methods. So if you go to a non-specialized methodological journal and you want to offer guidance, that's exactly what a methodological article is. It's practical. It's like, I did this. I wish I'd done a little of this, but this worked pretty well, and I had to make the following adjustments to a method, and it worked. So I would say definitely methodological. Now, sometimes methodological overlaps with empirical.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to read just a comment for the sake of the video from Cheryl. As a reviewer and sometimes editor, I'm finding more and more authors do not provide a detailed response to comments. Instead, authors just upload a revised manuscript. I encourage everyone to respond to comments in detail, even if you disagree. It is really frustrating for reviewers and editors otherwise. So good comment from Cheryl. And then we have a question from Leah Kane. I've heard that open access journals don't count as much towards tenure cases because they don't have the same type of impact factors that other journals do. Does that gel with your understanding of them?
Leah, yes, it does right now. It does right now, but this is a double-edged sword. I also think that this is a rapidly changing landscape because I think it's my read of the publishing world that we're moving very quickly into more and more journals having no choice but to charge an open access fee. Leah is 100% correct. You're going to get more points and promotion in publishing in a high impact journal. But I really encourage you to hedge your bets in the sense that perhaps you send one to a high impact journal, but then you also send it to lower impact journals or to open access. So you're not not betting that the high impact journal, which also probably has a very high rejection rate because they get so many, that you could lose a year waiting to get the reviews back, and then you've lost a year and your article is rejected. And many people talk about sending it first to high impact and then sending it, keep sending it even if it's rejected. So that's a good point to make out there. You keep sending it. I'm working on one now. I'm on the third journal. So you don't take a rejection as the end of your article. So it's a real double-edged sword on these high-impact journals because the length of time. I was at a presentation in December, and they were talking about the average turnaround could be 4 years in the Journal of Mixed Methods to publication. So if you go up to review after the second year and you don't have an in press, it's not going to count. Someone had a question here, and while you pick a next one, I mentioned that you have to be really sensitive to this issue of copyright and uploading into academia, into research Different journals have different stances on that, and you need to be sensitive to those differences. And they also get caught up where it also can happen. I don't know if you're familiar, but most journals now have plagiarism scanners. So, for instance, as an editor, when I first look at a submission, it'll have a percentage of plagiarism. So it'll say 3%, it'll say 10%. And believe it or not, like 20% is considered normal. So that since you might have 20% overlap with something that's accessible on the web. So you also, if you put the exact document up that is published without attribution to the article, then it could be caught in a plagiarism scanner as well. So that's another caution.
Okay. And we did have a question earlier from Tyler on preprint, but I think you addressed that already. We had a follow-up question on preprint from Susan. And that's that you were speaking to the intellectual property, right? So we've covered that. We did have a question from Idalis. How do you explain an MMR finding if you have contradictory quant and qual design features? But what happens if the data is complementary or supportive of each other?
You say that.
Two-part question.
Yeah, he's exactly right. In most cases, what it is, it's revealing different dimensions of the same construct, or it's a different aspect of the phenomena, and that in itself is important insight. So that kind of contradiction is generally complementary. In other words, a different aspect of the same phenomena or a different part of the wider picture, but it adds to knowledge. Because often the contradiction will bring it out, and then you're like, what's up with this? And then you pursue it and say, oh no, it's this is teasing something out that we hadn't realized about a construct.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Another question from Leah. Is there somewhere that collects special issue announcements, or do you find out about them by going through each journal's individual websites?
I'm not aware. It's a good idea, Leah. That would be a cool project. The ones I found was when I went to the AIM statements of just a random selection of journals. They usually had a separate section for special issues. I myself did a special issue with the American Behavioral Scientist with Judith Schoonebaum, and I had very good experience with that. Jennifer Green did one recently with one of the education journals that I had up on that panel. They were very, very receptive.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a question about exploratory sequential mixed method design. They developed a scale to measure employer stigma using qualitative findings. However, we just gave a table displaying themes and quotes from the qualitative study and corresponding factors and item samples. Do we need to provide an extensive qualitative analysis? And how do we ensure and report validity and reliability of this qualitative section?
Well, in the first part, you were saying that you showed the themes and then you link those to factors. That's brilliant. That's a type of warranting which is related to validity. So you're saying this is the path. You're showing your reader that these were our data. This is how we got to the factors. That is integration right there. That is beautiful integration in a visual. And that is part of demonstrating the validity of your findings of saying, look, they're warranted, they're tied to the data.
Very good. A quick question on when your next book will be published.
Well, I'm turning it in December, this is advancing grounded theory with mixed methods. I'm turning it in December of this year, so I believe it will be in the spring or fall. I want to tell you the difference in terms of timeline when you hear back from publishers. There's unbelievable variance. I'm sure it depends on their backlog. I just submitted one to Nursing Inquiry. I got a response in 3 months. I was astonished. I'm not a nurse, by the way. But I was very pleased at the return. It is also a product of how often they publish. So if they publish frequently, the return may be better. Sometimes it can be 6 months, 8 months, even though reviewers are asked to return reviews within a month. It generally takes a while to get reviewers, and then reviewers don't deliver when they're supposed to. So 6 to 8 months is more typical, but if it goes much longer than that, then it is probably worth an inquiry to an editor or to the editor's assistant or manager.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Raj is asking if you could talk, please, about how to use joint displays if he is using complementary stance with multi-phase study.
Well, joint displays, as they're classically described, and I much prefer the 3-column joint display, so that usually it has some qualitative data, sometimes arrayed against a quantitative index. So let's say you had a well-being scale, 1 to 5. And then here's what the 1s are saying, here's what the 2s are saying qualitatively, here what the 3s are saying. And then that 3rd column, whether you put it in the center and follow that pillar idea, or you put it usually to the right, weaves those findings together in some way, sometimes creating new hypotheses or theoretical propositions. Usually it is a table. It can also be a figure, but they're almost becoming a mainstay in mixed methods. They're really a good way to increase. If you use them with the 3-column, you're using them to advance your analysis. You're not just displaying your data. You're saying, here's qual, here's quant. When I put the 2 together, I've generated these new hypotheses. I may not pursue them in this study, but I've got another layer of insight. So I think they're more useful to advance analysis than they are simply to report, here's my qual and here's my quant. Lots been written about joint displays. Tim Guterman is sort of considered the expert on joint displays. I think he did a webinar on joint displays.
That's correct. He did last August.
Mhm.
We have another question now from Yvonne. What is the difference between MMR and, oh, sorry, I lost my chat window. Oh, goodness.
You lost that question?
I lost that question. What is the difference between MMR and design research?
Well, when I'm going to take a stab at this. When you first get into mixed methods as a newcomer, you start out by really becoming usually you become familiar with a set of basic designs, and that's sort of to get you conceptualizing how you could do it, right? But a lot of people, once they've done research, find that they don't really match, because usually research is more complex. So that may get to this idea that MMR is all about the design, and the idea that the design is how you judge the quality of MMR. I don't agree with that particular perspective because you could have a great design and very poorly executed research. Um, but it is a place to start as you're planning a project. Is it going to be two phases? Am I going to start with qual? Am I going to start with quant? So it helps conceptualize from the beginning. But a lot of published mixed method research is much more advanced than you see in those designs. About to wrap up. Quick plug here. Mira has, as I noted in the beginning, I think by now we have with IIQM an archive, I think 30 plus webinars. They have the
Yes.
videos, the PowerPoints. So it's like you could get a class on MMRI just by looking at the archive webinars. There you go.
Yes, and I've brought up that slide as well. Elizabeth, thank you so much, as always, for your ongoing support and of this webinar series, and the partnership that we have with MMIR is highly valued. I'd like to let everyone know as well the questions that have not been addressed. Again, this chat window will be sent to Dr. Creamer, and we'll be posting along with the archive video. The slides from today will also be posting at some point over the next couple of weeks a PDF addressing any questions that haven't been answered. A quick plug as well on our blog, which we've now breathed some life into again, iiqm.wordpress.com. And of course, our Thinking Qualitatively conference has moved forward to 2021. And if you want more information on that, keep your eye on our website on the Thinking Qualitatively workshops page. Also keep an eye on our Facebook, Twitter, and we've just activated an Instagram account. We're also on LinkedIn. So we look forward to seeing all of you again sometime soon in the new round of Mixed Methods Research webinars that will be starting later. Let's see, I think we're looking at July for the next round, are we not, Elizabeth?
Yes, with the exception that Mira is planning a webinar marathon in July, a day where we're going to do maybe 4 webinars in one day, and each one will be devoted to a different one of our chapters. So we're going to focus on chapters in July in a day-long marathon. Thank you all. It's so great to see everybody. I see some names I recognize all over the world. This is just wonderful. Thank you so much, Juliana, for your help.
You're always welcome. Thanks to everyone for attending today, and we'll have a link up for this archive video and the slides by the end of day today. So take a look on our archive site for that. Okay, thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.